The typical period of tangent is pi. That's something that we already know. There's no vertical stretch, no vertical shift. There is a phase shift to the left of 3. And we are supposed to graph 2 periods of this. So when I graph these, I tend to not really care about this axis, especially when I'm dealing with tangent, because it's often hard to even really um, think about what's going on with this. So I just kind of make up my own x values wherever I want. Uh, the big thing that's difficult about tangent is that the point 0, 0 on the original tangent graph is the point that we have to move everything based on. So we tend to like to move things in trig graphs based on the leftmost part that we kind of think about. So in a sine graph, uh, a sine graph looks like this. What we do is we take this point and then we shift it according to the phase shift, and then we maneuver everything from there. But in a tangent graph, we can't move it from the leftmost point. We have to move it from where x equals 0. Because if you think about every other graph that we move, sine of x, cosine of x, secant and cosecant, we basically base off of that. And cotangent, if I'm graphing cotangent, we move that one based on the asymptote at x equals 0. So all of these things are actually based on where x is 0. Um, Now, the goofy thing about tangent is that x equals 0 in the middle of a period. And that's kind of goofy because all the other ones, x is not equal to 0 at the middle of a period, x is equal to 0 at the beginning of the period. So when we are graphing tangent and we are graphing 2 periods of this, we have to move this point and then figure everything else out from there. So our normal tangent graph has a 0 at this spot, but we are going to have to change that in this problem. So our graph is now going to have negative pi over 3 as the x value here. So our phase shift moves 0, 0 to negative pi over 3, 0. And then we make all the other adjustments. So since the typical period of tangent is pi, that means from one asymptote to the other, the length has to be pi. So this is going to be um, real quick mental math. If this is typically negative pi over 2 and this is pi over 2, that means I have to do pi over 2 minus pi over 3. I guess it's not mental math. So that's 3 pi over 6 minus 2 pi over 6. So this ends up being pi over 6 right here. And then over here, when I subtract pi, I probably should have thought this ahead, but I get negative 5 pi over 6 as my new x value of this asymptote. And then when I add pi, I get 7 pi over 6 over here. It looks like with all the points shown in, see how the graph of tangent of x here gets shifted to the left pi over 3 from the point 0, 0. So that's kind of what happens, and then everything moves accordingly.